Out of Time by Pauline Baird Jones, narrated by Becky Boyd.
Present day. The C-130 rumbled through the sky, the propellers cutting into the gradually thinning air. Melanie Morton had been miserable on the ground in her wetsuit and gear, but as the plane went up and the temperature dropped, she realized she was an amateur and miserable. She'd done some crazy and misery-inducing things for her television magazine segment, Make Mel Cry Uncle, appearing 4 times a year on Brightline Weekly. But doing a halo jump with the Navy SEALs was taking crazy 30,000 feet too high. Her producer had had to do some heavy-duty persuasion before the Navy would allow her to even prepare for the jump, let alone attempt it. They'd finally agreed, perhaps because the powers that be thought she'd never make it through Hell Week, let alone survive the grueling training regimen that was required prior to the high-altitude, low-open drop with an actual SEAL team. But here she was, all geared up, and only one way to go, down, at 120 miles per hour. If she'd had any doubts about her sanity, she didn't any more. She really was out of her freaking mind. The sad part, she'd been out of it clear back to when she'd first pitched the idea that had eventually become Make Mel Cry Uncle. Since that time, she'd learned to fight various sorts of fires. She'd trained with cops and SWATs, trekked to the Arctic, done a stint in the Coast Guard and another in search and rescue, gone swimming with sharks, dived to deep-sea wreckage. The list was long and getting longer. 4 shows a year for 5 years. Dang, so far she hadn't made it into space, but it wasn't because her producer hadn't tried to talk her into it. There was buzz of going back to the moon, but that was so last century. Maybe if they'd let her go to Mars. She shook her head. What was she thinking? She still hadn't gotten her tush out of this plane, and she was thinking about Mars. She was worse than freaking insane, whatever that might be. Of course, she could cry uncle and go home. Show over. SEALs happy. Their charity would be even happier because she'd have to ante up the dough and not them. That was the deal. If she cried, she donated to their favorite charity. If she didn't, then they had to donate to hers. So far, her charity had made out like a bandit. They loved her. But all good things had to come to an end sometime. So why wasn't her mouth open, and why wasn't she crying uncle like a baby? Her grant could have supplied the answer. She'd told Mel almost every day of Mel's life that she was the most stubborn person on the face of the earth. It was probably her biggest character flaw, though it wasn't her only one.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?